Hello, I'm Skip Crooker. In this video, I'm going to share a strategy for selecting season win total bets. And so the first thing I'm going to do is load the NFL season schedule for 2021. Of course, I should say that today is August 22nd, 2021. And so I get the football schedule from profootballreference.com. And as an example of a team schedule, I pulled up here all the games that involve the San Francisco 49ers, so home and away games. And I'll come back to why I'm looking at San Francisco 49ers after some analysis below. Given a season schedule, right, every game, right, we're going to have a home and away team. And of course, what we need to do is come up with a way to identify the probability of the home team winning and the away team. A problem in this is that the opponent's abilities are variable. And so we need a way to do this, come up with a probability for the Lions winning, for example, at home, given the relative strength of the 49ers. And so to start this, right, one of the things that I believe is that markets do a really good job of providing information. And certainly we would expect this would include information about the relative strengths of the teams. So a particular market that I look at is the season win totals, right? Futures market, and in particular the market at Westgate. And so what I've done in this first table is every team and then the expected win total or the implied win total, if you will, from the season over under bet. And so, for example, at the Westgate, the season win total for the Chiefs is 12.5. So a better may bet on the over 12 and a half. So Chiefs to win 13 to 17 games on the regular season would have to bet 100 to win 100 and bet 120 that the Chiefs would win 0 to 12 games, bet 120 to win 100. And so what I've done to get this kind of implied market win percent, I take that expected win total and divide by 17, right? And so maybe this is a way to think about identifying the relative strengths of the team. So that's one dimension of what we're trying to solve is to figure out what are the relative strengths of the team. Now, one problem, and we can see here with the Baltimore Ravens and Bills for this strategy, right? The win over under total is 11 for both the Ravens and the Bills, but the pricing on the over is different, right? And so we would have to pay $140 if we like the over on the Bills winning more than 11. So we would have to bet 140 to win 100, while we only have to bet 100 to win 100, betting the Ravens over 11. Yet my implied market win percent is the same for these teams, and so clearly the market feels a little bit better about the Bills winning 11, thus the reason we have to pay 140 to win 100, right? And so we would actually want to move the Bills over the Ravens here. And certainly we have several teams hanging out at 10.5 wins, yet their prices are different. In fact, it looks like the market thinks more about the Packers' potential to win more than 10.5 games. And so we would want to their relative strength to be a little higher. So what I did was I took these EV thresholds or expected value thresholds, if you will, and I just added a little kicker to get the Bills to have a little bit more weight or higher implied market win percent than Ravens, right? And so I did that. You can see The Packers, I moved them up to 10.9. And again, to get some differentiation because the market is providing us some information about the relative likelihood of the Packers winning 10.5 versus, say, the 49ers. And so I wanted, again, thinking about this really as not any longer a implied win percent, but kind of a relative strength index, if you will. And so want to differentiate the Packers from the Browns, the Niners, and the Rams, etc. And so that's what I've done. Now, when teams had the same expected win total and the same price, then certainly I don't have any more information from the market to differentiate, and so I left them alone. But that was an adjustment that I did make. And so now, so thinking about, okay, so how can we come up with those conditional probabilities given a particular team's opponent? And so that's what I mean by naive. So I'm using my what I think are relatively ad hoc or naive power indexes, but then using what I think is a really good idea from Peta. And so I referenced Joe Peta's 2014 book and the conversation yesterday um, looking at Major League Baseball win totals. And so that's so this is that book again, and yeah, definitely I'm following Joe Peta and what he is doing. So I take and suppose that my naive creation is true, and then I use Peta's approach to calculate the conditional probability that Team A wins given they're matched up against a particular opponent, and we can see how those probabilities played out right now. If we return to 49ers season long conditional win probability, we can see that as a beginning point, beginning with my ad hoc adjustments, right? We think that the Niners are about 81% likely to beat the Lions in the first game in Detroit. And so then this actually gives us right. We could go through and calculate probability of the Niners winning on any particular week given their opponent. But maybe a key for us is that notice the probabilities aren't always the same, right? So the probabilities are changing based on the relative strength of your opponent. And so that's what we wanted to do here to think about how the season schedule is going to impact the number of wins a team can accumulate over the strength of the season. So the important thing here, if we've done a pretty good job of ranking the teams, then perhaps this is a reasonable way or a reasonable algorithm to use to simulate the NFL season. And so that's what I've done in this next uh, section. Right, we've simulated the season 10,000 times for 2021. Again, using the exact NFL schedule and then the conditional probabilities we came up with in the previous section. And what I've done here, based on these 10,000 simulations, I've repeated that expected win total from the market at the Westgate, the over/under prices, and now these three columns here to the end are based on the simulation. This is the probability that the Chiefs win more than 12 and a half games. And so we can see we only expect the Chiefs can win more than 12 and a half about 42.48% of the time. And by the way, that, even in this adjustment, right, we definitely have the Chiefs as being the best team in the NFL um, according to my power index. And so even with that being the case, still don't find that it's likely the Chiefs will win more than 12 and a half. This fair over column, this is giving us, based on that probability of hitting the over, what we would be willing to pay, right, to just break even on average with this wager. And so we need to have plus 135 before we would be start to look at that Chiefs over 12 and a half. You can see the Westgate's pricing at plus 100, so that not something we're interested in. Now, on the other hand, we do like the under, right? So the probability of the over is 42.48%. We would be willing to put up $135 to win 100. The Westgate only requires 120, so that suggests a profitable opportunity to bet the under on the Chiefs' 12 and a half season win total. I highlighted the 49ers above, and that's because we do actually like the over 10 and a half for the 49ers. Again, the Westgate's pricing the over 10 and a half wins for San Francisco at plus 100. According to our analysis, the 49ers will win more than 10 and a half games, 54.39%. So we would be willing to risk 119 or up to 119 to win 100. And again, market only requires 100 that we have to risk. So that looks good to us. And so go through, and if we go ahead and use our math here, we can see that Chiefs under 12 and a half is a profitable opportunity based on these simulations. Again, the probability of an under for the Chiefs would be 1 minus 0.4248. Let's see, with the Westgate pricing plus 100, we would win back the plus 1 plus our original risk amount, 2 times the probability that occurs. Let's see, and what is missing here? Let's see, so that's probably, so I forgot to put the price in there and that expression to get, but if we, let's see, so that would be my plus 2 times the probability that it happened, right, okay, and then minus our original bet amount, and so this is suggesting a 15% profit on the under 12 and a half for the Chiefs. Similarly, for the 49ers, you can see that bet on the 49ers over 10 and a half wins is going to give us about 8.8% profit. So just these two, considering these two alone, we would like to bet on the Chiefs. Okay, so that's so we could do that, right? Take a look at the what we calculate the fair or break-even price versus what the market requires, at least at the Westgate. And now what I've done in the second table is only listed those that suggest an opportunity for profits. And so we can see this table is a little shorter. So many of those wagers don't find that they would be profitable to take an over or an under position. So everything here, though, suggests a profitability. So even the lots of unders in this table. In fact, I think there were only 2 overs that come out. One was the 49ers we already looked at, and I believe the others, according to this table, is we like the Jaguars over 6.5. So 55.1% chance that the Jaguars win more than 6 games, and willing to pay up to $123 to win 100. The market only requires 110. I think everything else is unders. As we also did yesterday with the baseball playoffs, we looked at, okay, well, maybe taking particular position or how big of a bets should we have on these various win totals. That's a harder thing to consider, and there's some hedging going on, right? So these are correlated, right, because the teams are playing each other, and so that can certainly have an impact then on our expected return. And so we borrow an approach from modern portfolio theory to think about how we might take combinations of these bets to maximize our return for a given level of risk, or we could think about for a given level of risk, minimize for a given level of risk the maximum return we can attain. And so that's what we're going to do here. I again included the link to the modern portfolio theory, which always likes to jump in right where I can't click to it because of that WebEx header. But nonetheless, this is the link to that modern portfolio theory. And well, let's see, should be able to open it in the new window. There we go. And so, yeah, modern portfolio theory. Okay. And so what we're going to do here, we're going to think about there's 32 assets for every team over, and then 32 more assets for every team and the under. So we've got a universe now of 64 potential assets, taking the over and under. And what we're going to do using that risk and return parlance from our modern portfolio theory is construct the efficient frontier. And that is the extremes return given a level of risk that is attainable given these assets. And the fact that I've simulated the asset performances 10,000 times, right? We can calculate these expected return and variance covariance structure. And let's see, we could also go to Wikipedia, right, if we wanted to learn more about the efficient frontier. This is our Markowitz bullet, right, that efficient frontier. We've got risk on the horizontal axis and expected return on the vertical, right? So that's that Markowitz bullet, right, that frontier we're talking about. So kind of the limits to what we can do with our portfolio of assets, right? We want to get that smallest risk for a level of return, right, say, or the highest return given a particular level of risk we're willing to take. And so doing this for our NFL season win totals over unders, right? This is that part of that Markowitz bullet. And I've drawn our tangent line here coming from that risk-free rate. So 1, right? If I take $1 and keep it under my pillow, right, I'm going to get that. My dollar's still going to be there in the morning. So I'm getting that 1 return. And then that's riskless. And so find the point on our efficient frontier that just touches the frontier at one point. And so then we are getting that best or optimal return, which we discussed in the MLB baseball um, playoffs portfolio construction yesterday. So I won't go over that again. But here is what we've identified. Looks like about a 15% return. Now, thinking relative to the baseball market, we would say that this is a little worse than the baseball situation, right? So this is jumping back to our analysis from the MLB playoffs. Notice the level of risk here is certainly below zero point 0.5, and that was about a 16% return that we were looking at for our baseball portfolio. For the football, right, we're definitely higher than zero point 0.5 on risk level, yet the return is only about 15%. So just on this basis, right, we'd prefer the MLB playoff portfolio over this NFL portfolio. Nonetheless, let's take a look at what the optimal bets that come out of this approach. And so if there's nothing in the bet total, then our model actually has squeezed us out of positions. And so notice we like the Rams under 10.5 at minus 135, betting about 11% or 12% of our risk amount on that position. We really like the Saints under 9 at minus 150, right? Putting 0.3161 or about 32%. Also like the Steelers under 8.5, price of minus 130, wagering 37.58% of our budget. Small positions on the Bears under 7.5, the Giants under 7.5, and even a position on the Houston Texans under 4, right? About 5% of our risk portfolio. Okay, and so then that is our optimal bet. And we might think about, well, how would this bet actually perform or expected to perform given our simulation? And so that's what I've done here. I've got our bet amount, right, from our optimal bet portfolio. This 1.74, right, that is the return to the dollar if we bet Rams at minus 135. So to get that ratio right, we would take 235 divided by 135, and so that would be 1.74. And then this 0.6157, that is our simulation probability that the Rams hit the under. So that would be 1 minus that 0.3843, right, to get that probability that goes there. So we apply that procedure for all the bets we identified above. And by the way, all these bets are all unders. So we didn't touch any of the overs. We're only taking unders here. And you can see that based on our simulation, the index for the relative strengths of the team, our Peta approach to identifying conditional probabilities for each of the season long matchups, but then working that through the entire season, simulating that 10,000 times, right? We find that we can make on average about 15%. So on average, we'll make 15%. And so, again, I said if I was forced to choose between this NFL season win total and MLB, I would go with the MLB because of that lower risk and a little bit higher return. So, the other thing to mention, right, there's definitely some time value of money that should be considered. Those season win totals won't pay out until January 2022. And so that's a considerable longer time that we have to wait for that 15% return on average, whereas the Major League Baseball playoffs should be over by November. So if I just had a set amount of dollars that I was only going to risk on one of these, I would prefer the Major League Baseball portfolio over this NFL portfolio. And of course, we would really need to think about how accurate this approach could be. There's absolutely nothing that I've done here to suggest that my approach outlined here is reasonable, right? And so would want to think about getting some historical data to see how playing these season win totals would have panned out, right? If we would be following this approach every year going into the season. And so that definitely would be things to think about before you wanted to go out and risk money. Okay, well, what future podcasts, what I'm looking at doing is certainly we could update this as new information and the betting markets change, right? How does that change what these optimal bets would be? We could also use a similar approach. In fact, I think the very next podcast, what I'll do is take a look at the NFL season one. I'm sorry, week one. So just looking at week one bets because they are posted, and then at least beginning with our power index, if you will, implied from that season win total, and then making the PETA adjustment for the conditional wins for those week one matchups. Can we identify a portfolio of bets that are suggestive from our available sports book? And then of course we can monitor that each week as the season progresses to see how we're doing. I've also said we'll come back periodically and investigate the Major League Baseball playoffs, and as we get closer to that, those playoffs, how is that changing on which teams we like for those future bets for teams to win the pennant or the World Series? And really, we could think about doing having a daily model on Major League Baseball games, certainly going up to the playoffs and into the playoffs again based on these power indices. Of course, baseball, we spent a lot of time looking at the pitchers, and I've done nothing here, right? Yesterday, right? I should say I've done nothing yesterday to control for the quality of the pitcher, right? So that's and so that would definitely be something that we would want to think about. Okay, well, thanks for your interest and thanks for listening.